Hey everybody, it's David R. Becker, and today's the day. Finally, we're getting to paint on black. Welcome, David R. Becker from BeckerArt, and we are doing this every Thursday for anybody that's new here tonight, and we paint along with me to all different kinds of assignments that I give you. Tonight we're painting on black watercolor paper, which is by Legion Papers, and they make a black watercolor paper called Stonehenge Aqua Black. I usually work on their Stonehenge Aqua, and look, I have my glasses on. I was just looking at something close. We were we were looking at hey guys, we were looking at doing this afternoon, and so here already is what we did this afternoon, and so kind of fun. It was it's always fun to paint on black. It's a little bit different when it comes to the process of doing the white, but the same techniques that you use on the white you're gonna be using on the black. All right. So let's get going first with our toast. Today we have a Sketchbook Brewery Company sketchbook. Hey, we gotta go with sketchbook, right? Sketchbook Brewery, and it's a Orange Door Double Dry Hopped IPA. Not a big IPA fan, but we'll see. I had to buy it because it's Sketch Door Brewery, and so anybody who has a sketchbook, not Sketch Door, Sketchbook Brewery, Sketch Door, sketchbook. I haven't had it yet, so we're gonna see how this one is. And so every week we rate a beer before we get going. We rate a beer from 1 to 11 paintbrushes, and just something that I do. I don't know, let the phone go down. Anything else? Oh, so this paper is Stonehenge Black. They don't really make a paper like this on the market. This is 100% cotton. It's a sized internally and externally, and you can get a 140, 300 pound, and it's a super paper. They do make other papers that they call watercolor paper, but they're not 100% cotton. They're not sized correctly. They have weird textures. I've tried a lot of them, and this is the best one. And so really the only really true cotton watercolor paper. I love their 300 pound. It's so thick it doesn't even feel like 300 pound. The 140 even I gave to my students in class today, and they were surprised at how thick the 140 was. So let's get going here. Let me just show you a few things first. I want to just taste the beer. Gotta say cheers, guys, right? Orange IPA. These IPAs are always so bitter. The orange bitterness. So I'm going to give this one an 8. It's not my favorite. It's a little bit bitter. I'm not a big bitter beer drinker, but not bad, but I'm not a big IPA fan, I guess. But I just love the Sketchbook Brewing Company, so let's try it again. Yeah, about number 8. About number 8. It's not bad. I mean, 8 is not bad. All right, so let's see who's all here today. We got Paula, Sue, Barbara, Lynn, Pamela, Paula, and I'm sure there's a few more coming on, and we'll get to those guys in a little bit. Let me just go right away to our my website so that you can find out where everything's at. So here, and I also do a daily painting, and this one we did a while back, and so sometimes you can even pick up some of these paintings that I do on my website, and you can purchase them. And right now I'm doing that sale. All through COVID, we did this sale for $90. You get an original, and so you can get any of those for Christmas, or ask your husband or parents or whatever to if you want one of my paintings, you can get it on my website. Down here is where we're going to do our painting, and so this scene is a dark scene. And the last 3 weeks now we've been doing kind of dark paintings because I'm going to get you all excited about doing something on a black paper, so you don't have to actually do that much work. And actually that's what my students found out today, that it's really not that much work when you're doing the painting on black, because the fact that everything's already kind of painted for you if you're doing a dark scene. And so that's where you get my website, BeckerArt.net. And supplies today it changed a little bit because we use our Holbein watercolors, we use my brushes, but we're using Stonehenge Aqua Cold Pressed Black. And so I'm using a 300 pound, but the pads come in 300 pounds, 140, and I'm using a cold press. And so that's what I'm using today. You use whatever you like on the hot. They have all different sizes. They have all different weights and stuff. So if you get some, and also I'm going to tell you, let me just get through this while you study. I got a little surprise for you guys. Hey everybody else. All of a sudden everybody's joined in at once. All right, so here's the clock. Here's the scene, and I turned it black and white just so you can see where the black and white's going to be. And that doesn't mean you have to use white. And I know I keep on saying that you have to use white paint on the paper. You kind of do in the areas that have a little bit white in them, like the colors that have white in them. But like this pure red up here, this doesn't have to have that much white in it, because you just use the watercolor thicker. And it becomes almost like a gouache. It's almost like you're using it like a gouache, but you can just put a nice thick dab of paint up there and it'll be fine, because you are really kind of covering up the black when you want to go with a bright color. And here where you get some light or white, you don't have to put white, you can put white into a color, but you're going to have to make it thick enough that it covers up the black. And so that's the biggest problem I think most people have with this black paper. Let me just go right to our tabletop and get started here. But what most people have a problem with is that they tend to not use enough paint. You know, they use it and it looks good on the paper, but it dries maybe even 30% darker than the white paper. The white paper, it dries about 20% lighter. Well, this can kind of dry, I'm going to say 30% darker, because you really have to use a lot of paint to cover up the black. And if you want to first put on a little bit, so you're just putting on a tint and that will color the dark. So let's say this clock is a brown. Well, all you have to do is put a little bit of like a bright orange on it, and when it tones down, it'll be a brown. So that's more of a tint. And so that's what I want you to do, is try to think of it as like when you're putting a transparent wash down, it's going to be a tint of color. So that's, you're just taking the black and putting a color to the black or to the dark area. And so that's the biggest thing that I got to understand, is like, and most watercolorists don't use their paint thick enough when it comes to trying to get a bright, vibrant color. Here you have to. I mean, you're going to have to almost make it opaque. And actually you're using opaque white to cover up the black, because you have to do that. White paper you don't have to cover up unless you want to make it solid black. But then when you're doing a really solid black background, a really dark background on white paper, you're using a lot of pigment. And that's the same thing you got to do in this black. But you're going to have to use white, because that doesn't have any white in the paper. All right, so let's get started here. I've got my keypad here. I got on last second. And let me just show you what we did already this afternoon. So here's what I did already this afternoon. And if you look right here, I at one point decided I wanted to make this the fireplace and have it lit up. And so I put some light in there, but then I just rubbed it out because it didn't look good at all. It was actually very bad. You gotta stick with what you kind of start off with in the beginning when your value pattern. Now my drawing was not so perfect on this, and so let's talk about the drawing and how you get a drawing on here. They make transfer paper that is white. You can get it like Hobby Lobby. I think I've seen it on Blix also. So it's white transfer paper. It's a colored transfer paper, and you can trace like you do the black transfer paper. I used a charcoal white pencil. You can use that on there. And you can even, actually I started the one in class today, I just do, with regular number 2 pencil. And you can still see it. It's not as bright as a white. The white, of course, is really bright. And sometimes when I do the sketching, I actually use a watercolor pencil, a white watercolor pencil, and then when I'm actually putting my lights, like let's say right here, this is not a watercolor pencil, so I'm not going to use it as a watercolor pencil, because that'll just turn into pigment and it'll be washy. And so if I do this, it's going to probably stay on there. So if you're doing the clock, you can just put like a little light white on it with a watercolor pencil. You can just go over right with the watercolor pencil and actually get your lights, because basically all you're doing is you're first tinting the paper to make the color that you want in the darks, because the darks have to be the first. So you're totally opposite of what you're doing with the white paper. You go from light to dark with the white paper. With the black paper, you go from dark to light. So you're making the color of your darks, and then you go all the way up to white, wherever you want to do it. Now this area up here, if you look at the picture over here on the left corner, there's a little something. No one knew what that was in class. Still don't know what it is. I'm just gonna make it a light, but I don't want that to be my lightest light right over here. I'm gonna have my lightest light in this area, my center of interest area. My most contrast is gonna be that area. So I'm still following all the same rules and everything like that. So let's get going here. And again, let me just show you. We're going to start out with first coloring the clock, and coloring these dark areas if they have some color to it. If you want to just keep it black and not put any color in those things, that's fine too. You don't have to, if you would be doing it with black paint. The black paint would not just be black; it would be a color that the object is. you know, and unless you're making it more of a monotone painting, then you just use black and white. But that's not what we're going to do here today. We're going to put full color in there like you see it there. And again, welcome all you guys. Tom, Mary, Carol, Ann, Karen, Monica, Tabassum. Is that, I have to ask you how you pronounce your name. Tabassum. And Paula, Pamela. Welcome, guys. And, oh, I got a nice... if you go to my email address and email me your address, Legion Papers had told me that they will send you a mini pad of the black paper. If you send me on my website, you go to my website, you can just write in there. If you want to put in your address where you want them to ship, I'm going to give them all your address and they'll ship you a mini pad. It's a pretty small pad, but it's just a sample of the thing, and they said they would do that for you guys if you want to have a pad. If you don't, then don't email me your address. But I will just pass it on to them. I'll pass it on to them, and you'll get a free pad of a mini. I'm not sure which one. Maybe they'll give you a real nice one. I'm not sure. It's a mini pad they said they're going to send you if you give them their address to send it to you. All right, so here we go. So let's start out with our darkest dark, and that would be the clock itself. And so I'm just going to put some color. I'm going to put some warm color in there. I'm just going to go right over this. And I'm not pre-wetting it so much because it's kind of a tint. And I don't need to worry about this light going into the dark areas or the light areas, because I'm going to be putting the light areas over top. I'm just putting a tint over the clock a little bit. See how it's just a little bit of brown? And that's going to turn so dark once it dries. Right now it looks really kind of bright because it's wet. And you're picking up the lights and the darks of the room when you have a wet wash up there. So I'm just going to put in some of the colors that I feel that will be underneath to make these darks a little bit more colorful. This piece right here, I'm going to make it a little bit more colorful. Now again, these are my darks. These are not my lights. These are not the areas that are going to be light. These are the areas that are going to be dark. It's going to be this area, this up here. All the areas that are going to be dark, that's what I'm putting my eye on first, because dark to light. Dark to light. Get that? Okay, so just put some color in there. Tint it up. And it's wet. My brush is very wet. And it looks very bright, but you watch. Once this dries, you're almost not going to see it. It's just going to be like a small little tint. And it's going to be showing through about 30% darker than it looks like right now. And I've done this so many times, and you just have to trust me on this one. It's about 30% light darker. It's just so hard to get because you really have to use a lot of pigment. It's whatever pigment's left and you're using transparent watercolors, so it's transparent. And so that dark is really taking effect, where the white also takes effect, but it kind of lightening it because it's white paper. So this is just a slightly different in that aspect. And so up here, there's a wreath back here. And I'm just going to put a little bit of green in there. And also ask questions. Please ask me questions. Anybody who's new today, ask me questions, and I will look up every once in a while to see what's going on. Still working on last week's, but almost done. Good evening. Hey, thanks, Lynn. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Hey, you guys too. I did. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. So here's a little bit of green now. And a little bit of green in this wreath over here. And again, it looks bright when you put it on. You got to remember, it is going to dry. 30%, I'm going to say 30% lighter. Darker. I'm going to say that a lot where I miss, because I'm so used to painting on white that I'm going to be saying that quite a few times, I think. So over here, I'm going to put a little bit of red. I'm going to take Scarlet Lake, put that behind these little plant life that looks like little red balls on there. So I'm not sure what that plant is. Looks pretty cool. Here I'm going to take a little bit of that green again. Kind of a darker green. And I'm just going to put some of that in here to show that that's, what do you call it? Pine needles. It's a very holiday season looking kind of painting, you know, on a mantle. And I was going to put a candle in here even, but you can do that if you like. But instead, there's lights there. You can put that in there first. And so that's pretty much just my darks being lit up a little bit. And I don't want to have some of this to look like anything because I wanted to keep the dark of the paper. And actually, I have found with doing all these dark, these paper paintings on dark paper to be a lot faster to do. And I've also sold almost all of them. It's one of the things that it gives a kind of a moody effect, and so they start looking really neat, and people love them. right, so let's see. We're gonna go with the lights now, and we'll go the biggest area lights. Now these are my darks. These are my darks, and now we're gonna hit the lights, and we're gonna turn on the switch of the light, and we're just gonna bring it all in there. And how do you do that? Wet in the wet. You just water like you do the white. I'm just gonna put water down first, and do it right behind the clock here. Just gonna put water down, enough water. I'm not going to use my spray mister because I did the thing on the misting thing. I have it right here, the mister, because I want to have it floating. I want this pigment floating, and I want it thick. And so I am going to use a little bit of white from the get-go, and I have to use enough of it. And I make it thick enough because there's water here. So like you're doing a dark black background, you got to use enough of it to cover. You got to use enough to cover up the black. And so yes, it is not truly transparent, but you're using a transparent technique where you're floating your pigment, and so it will look very watercolor like still, but again you're using white and it is opaque, you know. And so that's where many of you will have a problem with doing this, because us watercolorists have always been known to not ever let them be opaque. You know, it's like you think it's not opaque, but even when you're doing, like I said, when you're doing a dark painting and you're using black for like a background, a night scene on white paper, it's opaque. It's going to be so thick that it's covering up your white. So that's saying that it's opaque. Even though it could have that texture and feel of a transparent watercolor, it's really covering up a white. So that means it's not transparent. You know, you can say whatever you want. That's not transparent. It gives you a transparent look to it because you're floating your pigment and you're putting it down like that, but it is not transparent in the end on white paper when you do a black sky, because you're covering up the white. And here we're covering up the black, and so it has to be pure white. And it has to be opaque, you know. And so us watercolors are going to have to start dealing with that. Because it's the way it is. I mean, you have to do it that way. Otherwise, you don't cover up the black and it gets too dark. And if you want a white in your picture, you have to actually use white. Pure white. Now there is like yellow in here. I can put that in there. I just don't feel, I'm not sure if the yellow will look as nice. It's just like a pink color. Now if you go over with water, you're gonna have to watch out, because then what happens is you're picking up the paint. You're gonna see I'm seeing through the black to the black, and so I'm gonna have to pick up a little bit more pigment again, a little yellow and white together, and so I can just put it on there, let it float. It's still pretty wet here. I'm gonna put a little mist on there, so that this mist is really cool, because you just kind of blast it and it just comes out. It keeps on coming out. I really love this thing. If you got my newsletter, you saw where I got it from. It was Amazon, and if you got my newsletter last week, I did a little video. You can also watch the video on my YouTube channel. So here I'm going in and I'm getting all the light. And hold on one second. I gotta shift my thing so I can actually see my painting on my screen. So it always helps to see a little bit of that. So I'm gonna go over in here a little bit. This is all wet. I'm gonna bring it over and make it soft edges. And this looks really light, right? I mean, you watch how dark this is gonna get, and this just shocks me how dark things get. It's almost like magically goes really dark. You know, it just, once it starts drying, all the water's gone. You'll be surprised. And so I'm using my pigment pretty thick where I want it to bleed through, where I don't want it to bleed through so much. And where I do want it to bleed through, I'm just going to leave it to look like it's wet in the wet, nice soft washes. I'm going to bring this over here a little bit. And you can rub out too. Watch this, I can just rub out really easily. So I'm just going to take it out there a little bit. So it's actually kind of easier to push around your paint a little bit, and it's pretty cool. Now over here, I want this to be maybe a hard edge right here, but then I'm going to want it just to bleed off into nothingness. And again, lost edges is what my big thing is lately, is I'm losing those edges. Just let them bleed and they'll look more fuzzy. They'll look fuzzy and blurry, and so the picture, and that's a lot of times a good way of not making something important, is fuzzing it up and blurring it. Now this is I'm negative painting the dark wreath right over here, and over here on the bottom I'm just going to let that bleed in again to a lost edge. Just going to take orange, maybe since I'm working with orange a lot here, just going to bleed that into a lost edge. right, and so that's doesn't need to know what's going on down here. Now we're going to our big white area over here, and this look at how it's already going to get a little darker here. I got to go back in here a little bit, get a little bit more light in there. It's still wet, so it'll still be okay. It'll still float. All right, it's so smooth, this paper, I must say. It's very like silk, and even though the hot press or the cold press is rough, it has this like absorbing texture to it that it's really kind of interesting, and I kind of like it a lot. Kind of makes a soft edge really easily if you use enough pigment and enough water. For these, I'm going to make these little circles of light, and so I'm going to just take and wet this area and just kind of make these circles of light. And then again, you're going to see how dark this gets. I'm putting in a lot of water, not that much pigment, and you're going to see how dark these get. Put a little orange in there. I'm going to put white on top of them, pure white, to make the light bulbs. And again, that's my light area. Go across this front of the clock a little bit. Negative paint in the front of the clock. I will put a wash there when I'm doing the red and doing the lighter colors. Again, lighter colors come later. I mean, they're coming now, but I'm doing the biggest parts of the light first. Get a couple of lights, and all right. And so there we have the light. I'm going to put a little bit of water there so this bleeds. Again, you can put it on afterwards too, and just let things bleed. All right, now we're going to get the front of this. And I couldn't figure this out at first, but I looked at and I made this. Let me go back to. I'm going to show you. Go back to the value study, and if you look really close here, this piece goes all the way back, and then there's another piece way over here, and this kind of dents in and comes out again. So it's kind of like the structure of the fireplace. It's like a little panel right here, and so I'm just gonna make everything white and put those panel darks in there later, or I can try to paint around them, but that's too little. So I'll just use the regular watercolor and go right over that. So this is just gonna be dark, so I might as well go right here. I'm just going to take some white, some dirty white. I'm just going to start. Oh, I should wet this area first. Let me wet it first. So I'm just going to wet this area. And even with this, you should watch out that your water is not too dirty, because it will still stain it a little bit with a tint of color if your paint is your water is too dirty. Okay. And see how my white watercolor pencil is kind of, or charcoal pencil is kind of going away, because it is more charcoal, and so that if it's a white pencil, it will go away after a while. So I'm just going to go over in here, make this part light. I'm using a lot of white, because this is actually white with maybe a little bit of orange in it, just to kind of give it a little bit of orange. And then wet into wet gives you the soft edges, the gradation from dark to light, from dark to light. And so how do you get that? You got to practice that. I've always told my students to practice on sheets of paper how to get gradations, how to keep something wet and then make it from light to dark. And if I go with a lighter amount of pigment over here, so I'll just go through a lighter amount of pigment, and that'll darken up really well. It looks really bright right now because, again, you're picking up the lights of my lights. I have these lights around here. They're going to pick that up. But you'll watch how dark that gets once it dries. And so now I'm just going to take the white and just bring it in on this side and start getting my lines and that kind of thing in there. Need a little bit more orange in this area. And you're just kind of sculpting it now. And I'm not going to be too worried about exactly getting those lines. I can do that after, once it's dry. I can go back in and get those darker lines, because I can always get my darks back by using black. That's really cool about this paper too, is you can get all those darks back easily, and it won't look overworked like with white when you're trying to get your white back. That's hard to do because you're staining the paper. Here, it stains it a little bit, but I'm putting black back in, and it works really, really nice. And it actually is darker than the paper, so you're not getting, like when you put white paint on white paper, it gets not perfect, but with black, it's really perfect. It's just amazing. You can use it right. You can still use the black paint and recover your darks. Again, this is going to be really dark there. It looks light, but you watch. I got to keep on telling myself that because it's so hard to believe And so a lot of times I leave it at what it is, and then I think, oh no, it's gonna stay that way. It doesn't. Believe me, I've done it so many times now with this paper. And so I'm now picking up a little bit more pigment because I really want this to be nice and thick, and I want this floating, but I want this to be pretty bright over here in the front, and then I'm just gonna let it bleed and float into this area. I did notice on the paper I was handing out today that on the 140, there is a side that's a little bit darker than the other side. I always use the darker side. It's like the back of the paper I think is a little bit lighter, and the front of the paper that I had, it was a hot press though. I wonder if that's the same thing on the cold press. But I must say that the one side was a little bit darker. It was like one side was black and the other side was just not quite black. It was almost, but it was just a little bit softer. Now I'm gonna pull out a little bit of this this work here. Oh, I just put water on there. Look at that. Ah. Watch your brush. See what I did? I didn't watch my brush. I had a little puddle of water in there, so I'll do that later. I'm gonna put a couple of lines in here. And this is going to float solid. It's going to float smooth, so I'm still going to get that looking smooth. If you have a wet surface, it's going to smoothen out. I guarantee you, it always does. Now this little spot over here, I'm just going to put a little nice white there, and then it kind of cuts back, and there's another thing over here. Kind of pulls back, and then it kind of does the same thing again. Alright, so now we're getting to the, let's see, what's another big part? Another big part is the clock itself. And so let's do the front of the clock. I'm going to use my smaller brush for that because it is a little bit smaller. So let's do the front side of the clock, which is going to be like a burnt sienna. Let's see, Lynn says, still getting used to the fancy spray bottle for painting, but it works super great for ironing and quilting. Love it. Yeah, I was thinking about other things I could possibly do with it because it is pretty cool how it's a dust of smoke. Hey, Tina. Nina came in late. Yeah, it dries about 30% darker when it dries. Yep, definitely. That was big points that I was putting across. That it does dry about 30%, I would say. It's a lot darker than you think it's going to be, and you get so excited about it too because I'll put it on and I'm like, wow, this is perfect now because I put it on there, and like I said, if it looks right while it's wet, it's wrong. It has to look, a lot lighter than you think it's going to be. Just make it like right now what I'm doing here. This shouldn't be this light, but it won't be this light, and so I'm trying to gauge it so that it will just be nice and dark. It'll be a dark clock. And no, it looks like it's bright red. And you watch. It's just amazing how far it goes. It's just hard to believe too. And I think you're gonna have to do a couple paintings before you start believing yourself in that. You have to put it in about 30% lighter than you want it. And it also depends on how much pigment you have on there. But it does get really, really light. Really, really dark. I keep on saying that. I've been saying that all day because I'm so used to saying it getting lighter. So there's the front of the clock, and we're just going to put this on this way downwards. And again, I know this looks really bright, but it will get dark, a lot darker. Straight down here. And see, I'm just getting lighter. My biggest lights are coming on. Again, totally opposite of what you do with the white. With the white, you work for the darks, right? In the end, you work for the darks. And here we're working for the lights at the end. The detailed lights are coming as we go here. Now I'm going to go and do these little lights coming out on the tabletop here. That's a big area, so I might as well get that in there. So for that, I'm going to do some really brightness right here. And I'm going to wet it as I go along. And it looks pretty thick, but it's still pretty wet. But I have a lot of pigment on there, so it will not look like you're using oils, but I don't want it that thick. I don't want it to be, I still want it to be washy, and I still want floating your pigment to be a thing. You still have to make that a thing. You're still floating it. It's still watercolor. Best way of applying a wash on watercolor is floating it and then putting water there so that it bleeds and blends itself. It's still on, even on black paper. Now there's just things about black paper though. Like I said, you have to watch out that that you put a little bit more pigment in. So now I know that looks really orangey, but again, it's going to look brown. I mean, look at how dark this has already got. See how it's getting darker and darker? It just gets darker and darker as you go along. Now I'm going to put a little bit of yellowy orange right here and let that float. Just let that float in there. It's going to look like it's coming out from the side here. Coming out the side of these pots or whatever is there. And then by having it wet, it floats and gives you a soft edge, because you still get the soft edges. That's how you get soft edges in watercolor, is you float. Float, float, float. Let it soften itself. Now that's pretty orange, isn't it? That's okay. It'll turn brown. You watch. I keep on, you know, it's so hard to think that it's going to get lighter, but it does. I'll put a few of these lights since I have it in my brush already. I'm just going to put it on here to give some highlights on the top of this wood. Alright, so now let's, I think we're getting to our smaller stuff. Let's put a little bit of this orange, since I have it, into this wreath up here. I'm just going to kind of give that look like pine needles, basically, on the edges here a little bit. And again, I'm pushing my brush in the direction I want the pine needles to go. So I'm just kind of pushing, strapping it like that. I kind of push it into the paper like this. So, just a little bit of light there. And that's again because I just want it to look like it's the edge of a wreath. And maybe I'll put some round bulbs on it, decorations, ornaments maybe on there. And again, those look really bright, don't they? But you watch how you're almost not going to see them when they get to a certain point. Any questions, let me know. And again, if you want to get a sample pad of this and you don't have a sample, now it's a really small mini pad I think they ship out, but they will ship you out a mini pad of black paper if you send me your email or your mailing address so they can mail it to you. I was just going to put them all on an email and send it to the guys over at Legion Papers. And they said before I started this, I was talking to them and they said they would do that. They would send you free a nice pad of mini black paper. So again, a little lighter. Now let's do these. Watch this, how bright I'm going to get. I'm going to get pure white. And really, I should start. I still want to get a new palette. I'm still trying to make one. But I want to have like two whites. One for mixing and one for just pure white. Because I always have to waste so much paint when I go in there. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to start just drawing these bulbs. I'm just going to make them look like bulbs. And I'm going to put 4 instead of 3, because 3... or 2 and then 1, a little bit different. There was 2, my painting here was like 1, 2, 3, and it was just 2 lined up. And I know this looks really sharp right now, but watch what I do to it. You'll see in a second what I'm doing to do. They look really sharp and really bright. Well, I want them to be white as white, and so that's fine. I'm going to leave them dry just slightly. I'm going to put a little wash around them with orange. You're going to see how they just glow. And while that's drying a little bit, I'm going to take this white and orange and just start doing the front of the clock. I'm not going to negative paint around the hands and the time marks. I'm going to do that with black paint. It's just like you would do with the white paint when you're at the end of a paper on white and you want detail in black. You just use black paint. On here and on white, you would use white for white sheets of paper where you want those little tiny white highlights and stuff. So I guess it's cheating in black, right, to put that in there. So I'll make this a little light. I'm going to take a little bit of darker color and reflect that into here real quick on the edge. There's a little edge right here, a little shadow. And so I can do that with soft edges, make it a little bit darker. So again, it's just like doing your dark, or doing your shadows on white paper. And I'm just reflecting that into the edge right there, a little bit of red, bottom here. Now last year, I remember we did a beautiful, beautiful lantern. I was looking actually for a lantern instead of a clock, but I couldn't find one that was nice this year because I want to do that. And actually next week we're going to be doing small paintings that you can use as greeting cards. So now while this is starting to dry a little bit, I'm going to take a little bit of orangey yellow, make it really bright, and I'm going to take and put some water around these lights. I'm just going to let it bleed right into the light because it's almost drying, but it'll be soft edged. And then watch, I'm going to put water, I'm just going to let them bleed out, and so it's like the light white is just, the light is lit up, and it's a little, like, nice little bright white glow, and kind of yellow glow, yellow white glow. So I'm using white and yellow. I'm just kind of putting it right next to the white. I'm not touching the white. I'm touching the white, so it's a soft edge. But then I'm just pulling out water, and I'm just going to let it glow a little bit farther. Now I have been using the airbrush when it comes to doing some things with the black paper, where I just spray a little bit and stuff. And that's fine. I'm not going to do it tonight because there's so many other things you got to do first with this that I don't want you to start thinking all airbrushy. And I'm going to do a whole segment one day, and we do about a lot of airbrushing to show you how to use the airbrush. Somebody had asked for that, and so I'll probably do that sometime down the road. A bit more orange in here. Again, going around here. And it can be hard edge, it's not wet first, but then I can add water to the edges, and that'll just blend it and bleed it and make it look like it's glowing, right? And it looks bright, right? It looks too bright. I know, it always looks too bright when you're putting it down. But that's the best thing. If it looks wrong while it's wet, it's going to be right. You want it darker, or want it much brighter than you think you want it, and then it'll come back down. Alright, so what else we got to do here? We're going to keep on going. Now we got, oh, look at a little dab in there. Is that dry yet? Yeah, almost dry. So let's go into our red, bright red. So the first thing I'm going to do to get these little dots over here is I'm first going to take and do a little stem. I'll do it in dark. I'll do it in like black again. I'm going to do a little dark stem and a light stem. Like this little stem here. Maybe it's going here. I'm not sure what kind of plant this is that gives you such light berries, but it's pretty cool. And so there's a dark, and then I'm going to take pure red with a little bit of white. If you use too much white, of course, it's going to become pink. But if you just use a little bit of white with your Scarlet Lake or this orange, a little bit will just make it a little bit more of that color opaque. It'll just make it look, it'll be fine. And yes, it is kind of opaque. I have to agree with some of you that say, well, it's not really transparent. Of course it's not transparent because I'm covering up the black with a white. So, and does it matter though? It doesn't, to me, doesn't matter if it is opaque or if it's watercolor. It still looks like a watercolor because we're putting these big washes in that's wet in the wet. Okay, now for these little circles. A great way to do a circle is have bad brushes. Brushes that don't have a really fine point on them. Unfortunately, all my brushes have really fine points on them, so I'm going to have to actually draw a circle where if you get like a brush that's kind of not very pointy, you can just do a dot of it. And so I'm just going to go in here now and just make these dots of these little red dots. Part of this plant. Again, I have no idea what kind of plant this is. It's a red dot plant. Pretty cool. I mean, that's the reason I picked this out. The whole picture I picked because of these red dots. I thought it was so neat. They just stood out so nicely. And again, these will get really a lot darker than they look. And so I'm going to have to go back in. I actually went back in twice to get some really bright color in there. And use it pretty thick. Again, you got to cover up black and you've got to make it look bright too. And so putting white with this red won't work because what happens is then it gets pink and it won't be that brightness of the red. So we want brightness of the red more than I want white, and I'll make it opaque. I can put a little bit white into it, but I want it more vibrant or red. So just make your red thicker. It's the only thing you can do. It's an obvious thing, but we watercolorists are always never allowed to do that with white paper. We don't want it that thick. But I've noticed that myself. I have been starting to put look at how dark those got. Remember how when I first put them on, how red they were, and now look at they're almost gone. You can barely see them. So we're going to just keep on putting in circles. I know this is a boring part to watch, just putting in circles. How did you push it again? I like the effect of the wreath. Oh, the pushing a brush. Let me just finish this and I'll show you how to do that to get the pine needle look. I just worked on that one time and I just accidentally got to do that. It's kind of weird how I learned how to do that. Here on this area, I'm going to do a little bit of white with red because I mind having this a little bit lighter. So I'm going to make these a little bit lighter, and they're going to be a little bit more pink-wise, but that's okay because this area is a little bit lighter, so I can add a little bit of that light to the red. So you have to realize, is it the brightness of the color you want to show out, or is it the brightness, the lightness of it? The hue, which is the bright color, the intense color, or the lightness of the color. If you put white with the red, it's going to turn it pink. So over here, I did some dots with the water, and so they're just being lighter. That's what gave me the idea, guys. I'm not that smart. Maybe I'll put a little yellow in there too, make it more orange-like. Okay, and then I'm going to reflect a little bit of light this time on the top of this clock. Since it is a shiny wooden object, I'm thinking that maybe a little bit of orange up here wouldn't be bad to like reflect it and shine it across the side. And so I'm just going to wet it and just pull it down and maybe put a little bit of lightness in here. Maybe I'll put a little bit of highlights in here. Why am I using this big brush? Well, it's because it's got a fine point. See how fine a point gets? So I'll put a little lightness up there, reflect it in there. And now I am going to put some dark greenish color back in there. So I'm going to take black and green, which I have to mix my green with quinacridone gold and dark blue. So I'm getting a dark green, and what I'm going to do is do that pushy thing again. And let me see if I have a sheet of paper here. Here's a sheet of paper so I can show you what I do with that brush. And let me just show you with the big brush so you can see it easier. So what I do is I take the brush, I put a color on, and I take, let's see the side, and I push the brush like this. So I'm pushing it to the edge. And so I'm bending the needles, bending the bristles to so it kind of bends it. See, like this. I'm bending back the needles. The bristles. I'm bending back the bristles, and I'm letting the bristles that are shorter make the look of pine needles. Now you're not going to get many red pine needles, but let's do it in dark green so you can actually see it. Let's make a dark green here, and so again, push your needles away. The front needles you push away, and then let the shorter bristles. I'm gonna stop saying needles now. Let the shorter bristles make it look like pine needles. Oh, did I do that off the camera? Jeez. All right, let's do it again. So I'm pushing away. I'm bending the. So I'm using the shorter bristles on the brush and bending the long ones away. That's how you make it look like pine needles. All right, and you can do it at any brush that has shorter. See these. The shorter bristles are on the sides and the long ones go through the middle. And so I'm pushing them away and using the side bristles to get that look. All right, and so now I'm going to do a little bit of that right in here. Might as well use it. I'm just going to put them back in here. Same thing over here. I'm just going to take that same effect and maybe even make them a little bit lighter and do some light ones that are lit up. Now we're gonna now we have to get our clock, because that's our most important part, is the clock. Put all our brushes over here, and so let's get our clock going here. And so that with that, I'm gonna have to do a really light. And so here's my white again. I should need 2 whites because now this one's all pink. So I'm wasting a lot of paint by getting all this pink off of there. And so that's how come I think you try to get 2 little places to put your white, one for mixing and one white for pure. Because mixing you don't need a pure white then, but for a pure white like right I need now, I want a pure white right here. And I just want to get that in there. And it's pretty wet. But see how dark it got? I mean, it got really, really dark, and so I want it to come back light. So it's a pretty big amount of paint on here. And I'm using it wet, going all the way down. As I go down, I want it a little bit darker. I don't want it as light down here. I'm gonna let that dry, and then we'll put our put our face on with black paint. Now let's start doing a little bit of the nice reflections and things like, and I'll do that with a small brush, like all these little light yellows, light pinks, and light reds and oranges. I'm just gonna, these little dots of light, they're flickering all around here, and maybe even be off the side here. They could be part of the bristles. Now I'm saying bristles when I should be saying needles. This is part of the needles here. Going around the dark of the clock. Little light dots here. Make it different values too. Make some lighter and different colors. Some can be more yellow, some can be orange. It's basically a warmth. And this time I left this a little bit cooler, just so that I'm probably going to go back in here and make a little bit of warmth right there, just so it doesn't look so different. So this is like in the darkness and the coolness. Now this got pretty light here, even though I put a little tint over there. So I'm going to show you how to put black back in there. Let's do that right now. So it'll dry by the time I get there. So I'm going to take the mister, take my other painting away from here. I'm going to take the mister and I'm going to spray this little area right here. Just a little bit of mist in there. I'm going to take and watch now how cool this works. So it's not really wet, it's just damp. And so I can put the dark in here and it'll give me somewhat of a smooth edge, because it's just, I just didn't want that, so now it looks light, but it's going to dry dark. I just want a little bit more black in there, and by putting the mister on it, it still gives me the soft edge. It's not so much floating, but I can get some neat effects in there with the mister. And now let's take and do a little bit of warmth, a little bit, or I'm going to turn this sideways so I can pull it towards me, or actually let's go this way, upside down. I want to take the yellow and kind of a pinkish, yeah, more of a warm orangey white here, and make that pop forward a little bit. So I'm taking a little bit of orangey white, orange and white. I'm just going to make that a little bit brighter and kind of bleed off this way. That way it brings it back into a look of what's happening over here. Now this is not floaty and this is not wet, so you're going to get a little texture from the paper. But I got a little bit of the warmth I wanted back into that, and I could spray it. Let's see, maybe a little bit of spray here. And that'll give me a little bit of mist, and see, oh, right away I can get a soft edge. See, isn't that great? Oh God, I love that mister. It's awesome. And then there are going to be those lines in there, but now it's dry again. Do we got time? What time is it? Oh, 18. Oh, it'll dry by then. We can make the little stuff. And then let's put a couple of dots in here. Again, we got to go for little dots of light shininess that's happening in here. And I still didn't do the lights on the clock itself. That little highlights that are on the edges, edge lighting, rim lighting, I should say. Rim lighting. And some of that can be almost pure white, actually. Because when something's shiny, it picks up the lightest light, and that could be like white, pure white of the light. These lights are pretty white right here. With all kinds of things in there, but I don't have enough red in there. See, I like the red, so I'm going to take a little bit of the pure red, wet it so that it won't be super red, and then wet it, and then it'll just have a little bit of red within here. It could just be the color of the light hitting the the pine needles. I'm getting some more black in there. I'm just putting super black back into some spots. Now I lost my glow. I'm going back and forth here. Okay, let's put the glow back in there. This is where the airbrush would really come in handy. I can just shoot it with little glows, which I may do after it's all over. I'll show you how to put it on there. Is that dry yet? The face of it. Let's put on a few more of this. Any questions? Let's see, how did you push it? Okay. Intensely not. Yes, intensity is sometimes a way to get the intensity of the red instead of getting lightness of the white. You know, sometimes that's better to bring something forward than it is white. And it gives it more interest too if you can get some intensity of the color red. You know, that's, to me, can be nicer than just white. You know, intense colors makes things pop too. So right here I'm going to put an intense red, and I'm going to put kind of a darker intense color in here to show the edges. Maybe an intense red on the inside here. Shows warmth. Then brighten it up with the white paint to do the reflections on the edges. Make sure you get a nice straight line. Try not to be too nervous. Light reflecting back. Put a little bit of light down here. This will show in the back here. One thing I haven't got enough of is this bright color right there. So let's put a little bit of a nice bright yellow right there. And this is dry paper now. I'm going to wet it as I go along. I'm just going to wet it. It's pretty thick too, and that's okay because I'm going to wet it as I go along. Just put a little water and let it bleed out this direction. And then water. Clean my brush though, but before I do that, make this look like negative painting of the pine needles. Going around some of these circles. That'll dry dark. Oh, look at the granulation. I got granulation happening with this spray bottle. Isn't that great? On black, I got granulation. Not something you always see. On white, granulation. Look at that. Alrighty, then. Put a little, see, this again is going to be brighter color. Instead of duller color, make it brighter color, and that's will replace my intensity of the white. Just a brighter color. Like the Sabin said, either it's lighter or brighter color. And here I put a little bit of pure, almost white right there. Yellow and white. Just want it really bright right here. Just want it really bright right there. And also right here I want it really bright coming there. And then I'm just going to take a little water and let it bleed out. I'm not sure what's happening in here, what that all is in here, but does it really matter? As long as we make it look like it's glowing, that's what we want. Maybe even a little bit of reflection into the tail by just wisping it downwards. I can make it look like it's wet. Now for the lines and the clock face, and that'll be enough time to do everything, right? So the clock face I'm just going to do with a black. And if you don't have the drawing anymore, you may want to redraw it. If you feel you don't have a good enough, steady enough hand to draw it, I'm just going to draw this circle. I'm just going to freehand it. Like I said, if you want to use a pencil, let it dry. You can put the pencil back in later, afterwards, and then just, I'm going to do the center of it here. Make it, I don't know what time it is here. And then a fancy, oh, that got green because I dipped in my green. What did I do that for? Then the numbers, Roman numeral here. Alright, so there's my numbers. And then I can make it even fancier by putting a couple other lines down here going around it. Maybe a little bit thicker. Maybe I should have been down farther, but oh well, it's too late now. I'll put a little bit of darkness on the top of it to make it look a little thinner up here. And maybe a little light reflecting on the edge so you can see where the edge is. I'm steadying my hand here a little bit with my other hand. See a little bit of white to just show reflections, little dots there. Not sure what's happening over there. It's kind of let's get some pure white. Boy, I gotta get pure white back here again. And then I'm gonna have to get some more dark. So we're almost there. 5 minutes, we'll do it. Throw the white right there. Get the shape of that. That's that. Back here we can do. Now dark. The last of it will be these lines inside your, for the look of the fireplace. And so I'm gonna go here first. A couple little lines. And then I'm gonna make these straight. So let's see what it's about. The picture lines up with the clock almost here. I'm just gonna go 1, 2, 3. Use black again. 1, 2, then go across, same direction. Did that run off the page? Kind of. I kind of put it in the wrong spot, but oh well, that's closer to this. That's okay. As long as it looks like it's the... And it's not actually totally dry yet, so you're going to get a little bit of fuzziness to it, which may be not a bad thing over here. And then over here, we're going to put little lines going downwards. And then since I did this wrong, I'm going to put a couple more lines through here, just so that I made a new design look for this fireplace. It's my own design. Alright, so there's my own design of panel. And I'll put a little bit of the same panel over here, because this is like a short little version of that. Maybe a little bit darker right here. It's farther forward, and so it could be more contrasty. Alright, oh boy. Anything else that looks like, this looks really messy over here. I don't like that. So I'm going to go back to black here. Nice thing is I can go right back into black. See how you can just kind of make it black again or dark. Take some of this red, put over this. A little bit more red up in here. Any questions before I get done here, guys? A little bit of really bright red off the top of this. Maybe make it look like some pine needles that are, the red light is kind of just, the warm color is kind of going up here, making some of these pine needles red. And there's just like a twitch, just have a lot of coffee before you do this part. Little dots, and I can take a few more dots up here, and we will almost call it quits, huh? Let's do a dark branch coming off of this way. Alright guys, I kind of screwed that up in there a little bit. That's the roundness of it. I'm going to make it dark right here. Black, a little bit more black. Lighter over here. Okay, that's it guys. So that's your black paper. If you have any questions, definitely put them on my user group, BeckerArt group, and Facebook. Ask them there. Ask them an email if you have a problem with it. Again, if you send me your mailing address, I will pass that on to the Legion company, and they will send you a mini pad of black paper. And I don't like that really quickly. A little bit more red in some of these. There we go. They're hitting off the little light there. Okay, that's better. So there we have this afternoon, this evening's, and also watch out when you're pulling out the tape. This paper is very soft, so it will pull off some of the, even the tape. See how it's pulling off some of the, it pulls off some of the paper. It's a little bit softer paper than the white, and so it will pull off a little bit with this sticky tape. So definitely pull it away. As you can tell, see it's picking up some of the black paper. That happens when it's wet. It's a little damp, so it's picking up some of that, but it's on the edge, and so it won't matter. And so when you can't really use a really heavy-duty maskoid or masking fluid on this, because it will pick up your paper and just ruin your painting. So you use the white paint. You don't need to use masking fluid. You use thick white paint, and that's a good enough way of showing getting your whites back, or getting areas that, or even some to get your black, because on this you would have to put it in there to keep your blacks. And so this afternoons, and this evenings, and it's always funny how the afternoon one usually turns out not as good as the evening one, but they're both pretty. They're there, so have fun with it, and I will see you next week. And next week, what we're doing is we're going to be doing 4 little paintings, or 2, depending on how far we get. I'm just going to do little greeting cards, and they're going to be. I'm going to take a paper like this and divide it into 4 sections, and we'll do these maybe a snow scene. It's probably got all these snow scenes, kind of like for the holidays. And so we'll do like little greeting cards is what we'll do next week, and it's gonna be kind of fun. I've done it every year before Christmas, and you can use them as gifts or as greeting cards, or to put on your packages, and just little things that are fun to do. It'll be like little sketches. So until next week, we will see you at the same time, same station, right? And here's to the number 8 beer. Cheers, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.